Welcome to the Living the International Life podcast, where we discuss all topics from studying, working, and living abroad, and even language learning. And I'm your host, Jazz Cole, president and founder of Multilingual and Philanthropic Incorporated. Let's dive right in. Okay, welcome everyone to this episode of the Living the International Life podcast, where we talk about everything relating to working, living, and studying abroad. And today on this episode, we actually have Kayla Belush, and she practically built a life and business as a speech coach for visionary entrepreneurs in Spain. And she previously got her master's in Europe in international cooperation for development. So I'm really happy to have her to kind of give her perspective on life abroad. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Jazz. I think these are conversations that we should all be having more, talking about different opportunities of things that we can do abroad. So yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Yeah. So, because I initially found you on Instagram, and I remember your profile specifically says American living in Spain. So I want to kind of know, how did you get there? Like what was the process of kind of okay, I'm going to actually go across the ocean?
Yeah, there was something that kept pulling me back to Spain. I came on a couple different occasions for different things, and I just kept coming back. The first time that I came was after my first year of undergrad. I was studying Spanish at the time, and I knew that I wanted to have something in the summer that I could be doing to really involve myself in the language, because I come from a very monolingual area of the US, from upstate New York. So if you don't find a way to search for opportunities, there's no way that you're going to be able to practice and live the language. I was very much a beginner at that time still in my Spanish studies, and I wanted to travel and have different experiences abroad and just have the opportunity to speak another language every day. That was my biggest dream since I was a kid. And I had just never had the opportunity to be in that sort of environment. So I set up myself finding out a way to become an au pair. I just went for 2 months. So it wasn't anything that required visas or anything. So I was able to sort of jump that hoop to go for just the summer. And I went to the Basque Country in Spain, the Basque region, and had a really, really great family and felt really integrated. And that's where I started to feel a really big cultural pull towards the area I was in as well, and felt like I made a lot of connections, I was making a family for myself in another place. And then I wanted to keep going back. So I went back the next summer again to au pair with them. And then afterwards, I just kept going back to visit them just for fun, maybe for a week or for Christmas or something. And I would spend a few days with them. And then after I graduated undergrad, I just knew I wanted to go back to Spain. I didn't really care where it was, but I just felt a pull to go back and find a way to be there for longer. So I continued my studies with my master's degree in Salamanca. It was one of the only couple universities had that master's program I was looking for. And Salamanca was the one that was most renowned, or maybe would have been heard of, by other academics in the US. And at that point, I had no idea what I wanted to do for school. So I figured I might as well go somewhere that had a bigger name. And yeah, I ended up in Salamanca. And then afterwards, I never left, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, because I understand that, because I came from, because I'm from Kentucky. And so my parents were also monolingual. And so for me, as because I originally just wanted to learn French, and that was it, because I went to fashion school. And so for me, it was just eventually I learned all these other languages, but for the most part, it was just I had, having to create your own environments for yourself, especially through international students, at my college in Los Angeles, and just kind of trying to find any way possible to actually be able to maintain that language skill. I'm interested about the Basque Country, because I know I've heard that in Spain, it's when you're not in Spain, it's oh yeah, I'm Spanish. But when you're in Spain, it's no, I'm from Catalonia, I'm from this area. So I'm kind of interested, were there any culture shocks you experienced, or was I think because I know sometimes when we learn a language, it's not always the same when we go to the country. So I'm kind of interested in hearing a little bit more about that.
Yeah, there were a lot of culture shocks that I had. And one of them being the fact that I was very beginner, like basic, still with my Spanish skills. I was probably understanding when I got there, maybe like 35% of everything that was going on. And it was very hard for me to communicate myself. I was very, very basic in being able to express the ideas that I wanted to share, very simple grammar at that point. So I was struggling really with the Spanish part. And then as soon as I got there, there was like all of the road signs and like the town signs, and like when you walk around, like menus at restaurants, everything was in this other language. And I was like, I don't get what's going on. Like at that point, it was my first time I'd been in Spain, and I didn't know that there was that sense of regionalism in different areas of Spain, because I just had no way of knowing until I was there experiencing it. So when I was there and saw everything written in Basque, which is the language they speak there, I was very shocked to see that. And I was specifically in a town that speaks a lot of Basque. So like just walking down the street, you'll hear like 50-60% of people just like speaking Basque in their conversations, which is really cool. And it became a goal of mine to like learn at least a little bit. And every time I go back, I try to practice my Basque as much as I can. So that was definitely a shock. I wasn't expecting that. And then the difference in accents was another thing that was really tricky for me, that sort of started to lead into me later on becoming an accent coach, because I was fascinated by it. I found it like really weird that people were saying words that I couldn't figure out what they were. And then when I saw them written down, I was like, I know that word. I've used that word. Like, that's very basic. Why am I not understanding really basic things? And it all had to do with specific speech patterns, not only from Spain, but also from the Basque Country. So I was really intrigued later on when I figured out that I could study that through phonetics and phonology. Everything just started to click and make so much more sense. But yeah, accent was a really big thing. And then the last thing probably that I noticed at first was the sense of like sarcasm and humor, and how they use it a little bit differently. People would be really ironic about things, something that I'm really bad at picking up on in English. And I sort of had to learn in my Spanish identity and personality to be able to deal with humor and understand humor in a bit of a different way, because I'd be very sensitive to things they would say, like thinking they were trying to insult me. And then looking back on it in retrospect, I understand that they were having moments of trying to bond with me over things that were like really funny, or things that they wanted to like pick on me about, but in like a kind way. And so it was as a part of like Spanish sarcasm. But I didn't get that at that point. And I was a little bit offended from time to time. And it took me a few years. I had a delay in understanding that they were actually being really nice and inviting me into their home.
Yeah, I mean, because I understand, like, because with minority languages, especially, because I remember attempting to learn Catalan, and it's like a combination of several Latin-based languages that I know. And then I also remember being curious about Frisian, which is the second official language in the Netherlands. And it's kind of like, well, what's that? And it's like, for me as a naturally curious person, I'm like, well, I have to know like what it is, even if I don't, know it in terms of like, I'm like, fluent or anything like that, but I'm still at least kind of like, I'm aware of what it is. And I have like some basic understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's something that they really appreciate as well. Like, and for people that like go to the Basque Country and travel there, obviously they don't expect anyone to know what Basque is, or like, especially if you're not Spanish, like a lot of people are completely unaware that there's another language that they speak there. Because people don't talk about it that much as a minority language. But when you say little things, as soon as you pick up on, hello, thank you, good morning, things like that, and you're like putting it into your vocabulary in your day to day, people are really, really appreciative of it, and they love it because they love the language. Like, they define themselves not as speaking the language, but living the language. It's something you see on a sign when you go into the town that my au pair family is from. And I was actually just there a couple weeks ago. We were on vacation visiting them. And this was the first time I actually understood what the sign said, because before I'd just never paid attention to it. I'd seen it a million times, but since before I didn't speak any Basque or understand any of it, I didn't register what the sign said. And I didn't really ever ask myself what it said. But now this time I was walking through and I passed the sign a few times and I was like, oh, let me like remember and think about what this says. And it says, here we live in Basque. Like, they don't say they speak Basque, but they actually live in it, which is something that they just have so deeply ingrained into them, It's just really beautiful. It's something they love, which I think is amazing because I've seen a lot of minority languages where maybe it's depending on the population and like the age group that is having the minority language maybe pushed onto them to try and revive it if they don't have that like link with the language already. I've seen this a lot with my friends in Ireland, actually, that are like forced to take a certain amount of Irish classes, that it was something that the majority of the population like rejected because it didn't feel like it was relevant to them at some point, but the country still tries to keep it alive. And there with Basque, it's something that's very much like ingrained into their souls. They absolutely love it.
Yeah. I mean, because I also like, since you were talking about like vacation, like how often do you get to like see more of the country? Because I feel like even like when, when I was studying in Paris, I know that a lot of people know like Paris is like the association with France, but it's like, it's actually a very diverse country and there's a lot of different nuances. So how often do you get to be able to see more of Spain itself, or even, not even, especially because I know that Spain is in the EU, or just in general, just traveling, how often do you get to really see more of Spain as well as like the EU?
Yeah, well, I mean, for being able to do it whenever, I could do it whenever because I built my business to be online so I could have that freedom to travel. But we also love just like the area we live in. We love it. We have family here. My fiance's family is from here, from the town we live in. We're a little bit outside of Salamanca, so it's towards the western border, closer to Portugal, in Spain. And we love the area we live in. We're in the mountains. We do a lot of like outdoorsy things here, and we just like have friends and family here. So we really do like being here a lot of the year. When we travel, a lot of times we do travel to the Basque Country because we really love it. My fiance also has like emotional ties to the Basque Country, so we go there a lot. We lived there for about a year and a half before the pandemic, actually, and then we moved back here after the pandemic hit. And I've been a little bit to a couple of cities in southern Spain, a couple of cities in Portugal. But besides that, I haven't really traveled around a lot of different areas of Spain that I want to see because it's like interesting. I don't know if you felt this when you were in Paris or Germany as well, but like the feeling of distances and how far away something is changes for me when I'm in Europe. I like go into a different mindset. And here it's like, oh, I have to drive an hour to get somewhere. Like, God, that feels so far. Like that's, you feel like lazy to sort of do it. Whereas in the US, it's like, oh, well, I want to go shopping. I have to drive an hour to go shopping. At least where I live in the US, it's like the middle of nowhere. So it's very rural. So you're just used to having to drive 2 or 3 hours to do anything that's like, relatively different or new. And here I could do the same driving 2 or 3 hours, but it feels like more of an effort almost because people don't travel as far of distances, or they perceive distances as being further than they really are because people are very regional and like staying in their towns.
Okay. Yeah, I remember because like when I was living in LA during my undergrad, I specifically remember having to like travel at least like an hour. I mean, especially it was longer if you were taking like the train or something, especially when you had to like transfer. So it was like the commute was just kind of like what I was used to. And I also had a job, I think after college, where I had to go all the way out to Orange County, which is about an hour and a half driving, depending on traffic. But also the train, it was like, I think the train was a little bit faster because they weren't going through traffic. But still, it's like, that was just kind of like the minimum. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of want to shift to the aspect of like when you were talking about when I mentioned about your master's. What was the process of that? Because I know like there can be a lot that goes into, like, oh, I'm just going to go study in this country. But, like what were like the different components? I feel like I feel like I also want to touch on just like challenges you also had in that process as well.
They were pretty much all challenges. Essentially, like the only reason I did it is because I just had my heart so set on being able to do it. But it was a really like tricky process to figure out, and I didn't have anyone to help me in the process either, which was really frustrating. And I mean, I spoke Spanish fluently at that point. By the time I was going to do my master's, the master's was all conducted in Spanish as well. So I was fluent at that point, but dealing with things that had to do with like paperwork and bureaucracy and different sort of administrative processes that I had never been accustomed with, because they do it very differently in Spain compared to the US. I was very confused about everything. And so when I told, it was in my last year, I was in my senior year of college, about to graduate. It was the end of January, beginning of February. And I had this idea that I was like, I want to do my master's in Spain starting in the fall. And I was like, well, I've really got to figure out what to do, because I haven't researched this. I've just made this decision. Let me find programs. Let me find options. I was talking to some different professors of mine in both the Spanish department and in like the political science department. I knew a lot of them, and was asking for recommendations and what they thought. And actually, a lot of them were not very supportive of it, like, which I was surprised by. A lot of them thought that it was maybe a mistake to do a master's in Europe compared to the US, when you could just stay here. And for me, it just wasn't a logical decision to stay in the US to do my master's, because I knew that whatever I did, I wanted it to be something where I was consistently using another language. And it just felt fun for me to be in an environment where I had to use another language to do that. And if I studied something like international cooperation for development in the US, it was going to be impossible to have that study, like that specific program, be completely in Spanish. But I wanted to be able to use those skills in Spanish later on. So for me, it didn't make sense to even stay in the US. Also, I was someone that was funding myself to go through college. So I was using, I had scholarships. I was a resident advisor to pay for, living on campus. I had always like 2 or 3 jobs that I was working. So financial things were something that were really a part of that as well. And the cost of being able to do my master's in Europe was much more accessible than if I did a master's in the US. So that was also very attractive to me, because I didn't want to be paying student loans for the next 20 years of my life for something that I didn't even know, what my end job was going to be. So the biggest part that was tricky in this process was when I actually started working with like the bureaucratic system in Spain. Actually applying for the program was really easy. That was pretty simple, more or less. And then when I had to actually start to get all the paperwork together to officially be invited into the program and be able to pay my tuition and all of that, that's when I realized that there were a lot of complicated things that started to come up with, like the student visa process. A lot of them I went through because, and I'm not sure what this was like for you in Paris or when you went to Germany or how long you were there for, but as an American, since we have so many like roadblocks for a lot of countries to come in and be in the US for longer than 90 days, in Spain at least, they just do a reflection of whatever the US does for them. So if you have to go through X amount of processes to be able to study abroad in the US, you have to do the same here in Spain. So they asked for a lot of paperwork, but a lot of the paperwork was paperwork that didn't even really exist in terms of like certificates and stuff in the US. And I had to get a lot of things documented and signed and sent out to like the New York State to get, what was the term for it? An apostille. I don't even remember what it was called in English, but I had to get everything like signed and taken care of like months in advance and sent out to the embassy. I had to take multiple trips to the Spanish embassy in New York City, which was really far from where I lived. So there was just a lot of bureaucratic things I had issues with. And I had to call the Spanish embassy a ton of times and the University of Salamanca a ton of times from the US to try and figure out and sort of like argue with people in Spanish, which I was very nervous about at that point. About what to do for administration. I even had to fly out to Salamanca the summer before starting my tuition to turn in certain paperwork that I wasn't going to have on time because I was just graduating that year. So I didn't even get my graduation like certificate and everything, my diploma, until the end of May because I just graduated. And they're like, no, we need this by X date, and it wasn't going to get there in the mail in time. So me and my mom flew out to Salamanca because I'd never even been there before. So we're like, well, I guess we'll take a trip out to Salamanca and see it and turn in your paperwork. So it was definitely like a group effort with my parents helping me figure out how to get there and get paperwork in. But a lot of it, I was really alone for it because I had to do all of it in Spanish. And that felt definitely really intimidating at the time. But I was just dead set on doing it. So I made it happen.
I mean, That's insane. I mean, the idea of like having to fly out. I mean, because I remember I think like when I was working on my au pair visa, I remember I had to I remember like they mailed out their, I forget what it was called. It was like basically it was like an official document they had to go get from the government saying that they legally live at their house. And I needed that for my
Yeah.
visa. And they mailed out the original copy and it didn't arrive in time. I was like, okay. So I remember having to explain to them at the embassy why I don't have this. And it was like, they're like, well, where are you going? And I was like, well, because my first family originally was in Sela, and I actually did like an au pairship with two different families, and I remember they were in Sela, which was like, she's like, where is that at? And I'm like, it's a small town outside of like an hour away from Hanover, and so she's like, oh, that's a small city. It's like, you know what? Just go to the U.S. I mean, go to the Germany, then go book an appointment at the embassy at the foreigner's office there, because when you're a US citizen, you don't have to have a visa to enter. You just have to go to the foreigner's office and get like a residence permit. I think that works just as good in terms of like having permission to stay there. And they require less documents. So it was like, instead of having to put in all of these different things, it was just, and then like they'll ask for like 2 copies of every single thing, like 2 sets. And I'm like, that's a lot of paper. And then, on top of that, it was like, well, like they just asked me for 100 euros, like some application documentation that this person is paying you, and that's it. And then you go to an interview. And so I was like, well, all right. And it's like being an au pair, it's not something complicated because it's like, it's a very worldwide known program. So it wasn't like I had to do like, like, I don't know, like it wasn't rocket science. But I know like sometimes like when you're kind of going on the other end of like the visa process in itself, I feel like it's a nightmare. And because I know I'm trying to start a master's in the next couple of years, because right now I just got a new job. So I was like, well, I should keep this for a while. And then because I'm really interested in psycholinguistics, it's very, I think the aspect of learning languages and kind of learning how people learn them in a way that they learn their native language. And I remember finding a really good school in Belgium, and I'm like, and the program has English as language of instruction, but at the same time, it's like you're still in an environment where you're gonna like, after you get out of class, there's still like other people speaking different things,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, that's super cool. Psycholinguistics. Is that so you're planning on going to Belgium to do that master's in the next couple of years, is your plan?
Yeah, I mean, because I had like a different amount, like I think I want to say like 2 or 3 different countries that I wanted to do a master's in, because I knew for a fact I wanted to go get either a master's in Europe somewhere in either France, Belgium, or I was also looking at Switzerland because they all kind of have languages that I know. And then kind of apparently Belgium is actually one of the top 5 countries in the world for linguistics in general. So there are a lot of different programs I looked into. But I think for me, the process is just not only just finding the time, but it's mostly just trying to have the mental energy to figure out, okay, like what are we going to do about applying, and what are we going to do about having to, because there's a communication barrier in terms of like time difference. And then there's also the fact that you know, um, applying is a whole different process than the visa. So you're basically dealing with several different processes at once. So it's kind of interesting for me, like when I'm hearing your experiences. I don't know, because I mean, I feel like it's something I know for a fact is possible, but at the same time, it's just more of like are we like getting mentally prepared to deal with the whole like you said, bureaucracy.
Yeah, I love the fact that you mentioned like the mental strain that it can cause, because it definitely is mentally taxing. I think it's just like anytime you're preparing for a new like chapter in life, and there's a lot of different things like loose ends that you have to tie up before you're able to do something. But what got me through it was after I actually like applied for the program, they said yes. And then they're like, okay, well, now you have to start all of these other things to make sure that administration wise, you're able to like keep your seat, your space in the program, because it ended up being all full. Like there was no wiggle room for if I had like paid late, or if I like got my my paperwork in late, like I just would have been out, and it would have definitely switched up the trajectory of like what that year would have been for me. But after I got the confirmation that I was accepted and I just had to figure out the paperwork stuff on my own, I was so excited about the fact that I was going to do it and had like all of these like visions and ideas of all these cool things I was going to do and what it was going to be like, and was like fantasizing about my like what it was going to be like to do a master's degree in Spain, especially since I already knew how much I loved Spain and being in another city and experiencing a different part of Spanish culture. I was just so excited that every time there was like another barrier, like it was mentally draining, but it was okay, because I was so excited for what was going to come after it. And there were times with like, you know, the communication barriers, like time difference, especially I remember in like July, August, when a lot of pretty much all Spanish administration just like shuts down. Spanish, actually on the news today, I was watching the news with my fiance's family after lunch, and the presenter on the news, he was saying, he actually described in his own words, he's like, yeah, Spain in August is just a big party. Like Spain is just a party. Like it's really true. Like everything shuts down. But I was like, I have deadlines I have to meet and dates I have to do stuff. So I was like constantly calling the office or writing them like via email to see what days they were going to be open and what times. And most of the time they were only open until like maybe 12 or 1 p.m. because they were like shutting down for things with vacation and all of that. So there were mornings when I actually woke up at 5 a.m. to be able to call. So I was like so flustered. I was like not even awake and calling and trying to talk about administration and bureaucracy in Spanish with these people about processes that didn't make any logical sense to me. But it was just what I had to do to make it happen at like really random hours of the day. But now those are like really good memories I have in retrospect. Like I'm really proud of myself for having gone through all of it, because I think a lot of people maybe wouldn't have done it. Like they would have like given up, but the end of it is definitely worth it. So don't be, yeah, for anyone that's like, that wants to do it, like don't feel intimidated by it, because I mean, any experience that's worth it is not going to be just like handed to you ever. Like you're going to have to like work for it a little bit, and it's going to be so fun for you to know what's on the other side, that it's just going to like fuel you every time you have to do something small, because you're just getting a step closer to living out another dream of yours. And that feels really exciting.
Yeah, I can understand that, especially because even when I like beforehand, when I was going, because like I said before, I went through this whole process before when I was, trying to get to my host family. And I remember like the whole time I'm literally thinking, I just like, because I had the cutest like triplets. They're all girls. They're 4 years old. It was a lot just because there's 3 of them to kind of deal with. But at the same time, at the end of the day, I was like, I just want to get there to get to my little girls. So I feel that for that aspect. And then for you, since obviously as an au pair it's different, because you're being provided like places to live and food, but like when you kind of get there and you're kind of figuring out, okay, well, I'm here, I'm accepted, okay, I got to find a place to live, I have to be able to afford to do other things like buying food and transportation. Like what was that process for you like after you kind of after getting through the first hurdle?
Yeah, so that part was definitely trickier, but I would say it was more fun, because all of those things at that point were like tangible things of like, I was finding the place I was going to live. Like, so it was like apartment hunting or house hunting, like that was really fun. And something that I found that was most helpful for that was joining different expat Facebook groups for the specific city that I was in, to ask other people who were studying like what they did, where they went, who they talked to. And through there, I was able to get recommendations from different people about different places they went. And then from all of that, those lists of recommendations that you can get from people who also went through it, then you can decide which one works best for you. So I went through a couple of different options to find what was going to be best for me. Definitely some people recommended things and swore by them that I was like, okay, that's not going to work out for me. Like, that's just not the way I want to do this. So you always have to decide for yourself, even if everyone's doing the same thing, ask for people to give you options, ask them to help. I feel like the expat community is very, very helpful in the sense of like, you get to a new place and you don't know what to do. So it's really nice to be in those groups and have people give you that support. And then when you see all those options, decide what works best for you. So I found like a specific website where local people from Salamanca would put up their houses, like their apartments for rent, and they would rent out specific rooms. And that worked for me. You had to, that wasn't really hard to get an apartment, even though Salamanca is a really big city for like a lot of people go and study there. It's very much like a student-based city. And even then it wasn't that hard to find an apartment. So that was a pretty easy part of the equation. The hardest thing for me was when you go to Spain and you get like a student visa and you're on a student visa and you have to show it when you go in. Then, so I had to have all the paperwork already like wrapped up before I went through immigration when I got there on the plane. And the thing that you're not allowed to do, even as a Spanish resident, is if you're studying full time, you're studying full time. Like that's what you're doing. You can't like have a job apart from it. And most people that do go like do a master's program or study, they have some sort of scholarship that they get from the government to make it pretty much almost free compared to what we think of what we pay in the US for higher education. So if you have any sort of scholarship, you can't work. And if you work, then you know, you're basically just giving up any right to a scholarship, or you would have to give back money that you accepted from a scholarship. And as a foreign student, you're just directly like not allowed to work. So I wasn't allowed to like get a job or do anything to like provide for myself. So I had to make sure I had per month I was going to be there, proof that I was going to have 700 euros per month to live off of, to pay for everything. Salamanca is a pretty cheap city to live in because there's a lot of students there compared to like other places like Madrid or Barcelona would have been a lot more expensive. Basque Country is way more expensive. But Salamanca, it was much more manageable to be able to not work and have to have like the savings or being able to ask for support from like parents or something without feeling like it was a ridiculous amount of money for the months of the master's. And it was only 1 year, not even a full year. It was from September to July. So it was something that was a little bit more accessible than if I were in Barcelona. Who knows how much they would have required me to have per month, but it probably would have been a lot more.
Okay. And then like, so even like going further like into like the program, like what was that like? Because I know that you were saying that you're looking for something that had more of like a Spanish based, like Spanish as your language of instruction. So how was that, you know, especially because I know like for me, like even though like when I was in Germany, like I was in an environment where I was only speaking this language. And that was kind of for me a little bit of a shock because having to adjust to the fact that I'm speaking this language every day when I normally don't do that. You know, and then also like having to build community because I know that sometimes what can really make or break someone's experience can sometimes be, oh, I couldn't find friends. And I know for you, probably the language barrier wasn't as, you know, as difficult as it would have been like if someone came in and they didn't have as much of a language barrier. But I'm really curious as to like your holistic experience just being a student.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even going and already being fluent, because there's so many levels of fluency. And even in, you know, English, you know, we can feel super fluent or super able to express ourselves one day, and then another day feel like the words just don't come out of our mouth. So, you know, there's a lot of different layers of fluency. And that's something I work on a lot with like my clients in my business now is all those layers of fluency. But I was already fluent. Definitely not the way I am now, but I felt really confident and comfortable in myself in that sort of environment. And even then, the first day of class that we had, it was like a program where it was in person, but only 1 day a week. So you would have a lot of independent work you would have to do Monday through Thursday, internship sort of work and stuff like that. And then on Friday, we would have classes from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. So it was very, very intense. We had like 2 breaks throughout the day. So it was like pretty much everything back to back. It was very, very intense, talking about really high level topics with economics, politics. Yeah, just a lot of like really dense material that we would go through all in 1 day. And the first day of class, I was very, very excited to be there and meet everyone and see people in the program and see what it was like. And I got to the end of the day and my brain was fried. I like
Mm.
couldn't, I felt like I couldn't speak like in any language. I was like just totally shot from, I call it the linguistic fatigue. I was just like,
Yeah.
I cannot anymore. And the end of that day, I felt like I couldn't say anything. And I was very, very overwhelmed. And that happened maybe for the first like 2 or 3 weeks. And then after that, I just acclimated and I was used to it. But at first it was definitely a shock for me because I hadn't had to have such high level conversations for such extended amounts of time. So I really feel like I had to train my brain to get used to like running a marathon instead of little sprints, which I had
Yeah.
been doing the summer before going there. And then in terms of community, I think at the beginning of the program, when like everyone sort of is more open to like, meeting each other, being friends with each other, I definitely felt like I had a lot of people to hang out with and do things with. But we were a pretty small program. There was only 40 of us in total. And not all of us lived in Salamanca. Like some people came from other places and other cities. So not everyone was there. So maybe there was like 20 people that were from Salamanca. And then out of a group of 20 people, you're not going to get along with everyone, or you'll realize that you get along with them, but they're not necessarily people that you want to hang out with every day. So I had to sort of find, the couple of people that were going to be my crew, for the year. But there were times where I definitely felt a little bit lonely in that sense, because something I notice in Europe is that when people do their study abroad, because I was the only American, pretty much everyone was European or from Latin America that was in the program. And when a lot of people do study abroad, they call it Erasmus in Europe. And for the Erasmus programs, like all of the French people hang out with the French people, the Germans hang out with the Germans, the Belgians hang out with the Belgians, and they're very, very cliquey in that sense, is what I experienced, at least in the Salamanca like university environment, which totally makes sense because you're in a place where you're in a different environment using another language. Everyone, needs a break sometimes, and you want to feel comfortable, and people just naturally are drawn to what feels most comfortable for them. I did find a group of Americans that like did the same thing, but my interest was always like, I loved Spain and I wanted to be able to feel like in my social interactions, I wasn't separating myself from everything that was Spanish. Like I wanted to be able to integrate all of it. And not everyone wanted to do that in their free time. Like, the French people didn't necessarily want to be hanging out in their free time with other people that were speaking Spanish. And maybe they just wanted to hang out with other French people. So that was challenging sometimes, but I knew it came from a place where everyone was just trying to be most comfortable, and that I was exceedingly comfortable trying to be uncomfortable in a way that other people weren't, if that makes sense. So yeah, that was one of the things that was harder for me. And I don't really feel like I felt at home in terms of friend groups until maybe about 2.5 years ago. And I've been in Spain for about 5 years. So it took me a while to feel like I could find my footing there.
Okay, yeah. So you've been in Spain since you've been in school, or did you kind of come back and then go back to the US and then come back?
Yep, I travel to the US pretty frequently, maybe like normally twice a year, and we'll stay for maybe 2.5 months when we go, just to take advantage of time with family. So we'll go around, like Christmas or important times of year when there's going to be things happening in the family, so that we get to spend more time with them. But yeah, it's like in terms of like full-time living somewhere, I've been in Spain since the master's program. So that was in 2018 when it started.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So, and then even like coming after that, like when, like what do you feel like you were going to do with your master's? Because I know sometimes, we may, like for me, like my master's, I realized that I wanted to get one because, it's now relevant to what I wanted to do. Because my background is in the fashion industry. That's what both my undergrads were in. And so then I was like, well, now I'm transitioning into like, my interest being in, in the linguistic and foreign language education. I'm like, well, I don't, I felt like I just didn't have the skill set to do what I wanted to do in that career shift. But like for you, like, what did you feel like you wanted to do? Or like, okay, well, I have this degree. What do I want to do with it?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And one of the things that frustrated me the most, and was probably the hardest for me about the whole experience of staying abroad after being a student, like having to be like an adult, like to live your adult life and build your adult life. Because in terms of like when I was in America before, it was always just as a student. Like I had jobs, right? But they weren't, I always had some sort of job, but it wasn't like a full-time career. You know, I didn't have a career. I just had jobs that I would work. So it was like a different feeling of trying to establish yourself and find a career that I hadn't done in America either. So I felt very lost. But I did know that I wanted to work with nonprofit organizations. That was sort of my goal. And my specialization that I was really researching was on immigration and refugee studies. So what I wanted to be doing was helping and assisting immigrant or refugee populations with sort of acclimating to the process of when they came over to Spain in this case, whether it was like linguistically, you know, socially, culturally. I really wanted to be a part of that integration process with them. That was what I had pretty much studied the entire time that I did my undergrad and my master's. And with all of my internships and a lot of jobs I had, that was what I was really focused on. So I felt very comfortable and confident in that. And I was really excited to do it. And I had more passion than like anyone else to want to find one of those jobs. Like I would have done anything to find a way to do it. And I was volunteering like 20 hours a week in different organizations, trying to get my foot in the door and like, you know, find places where I could, you know, work and show people how passionate I was about it and how much I could help them. And I was getting, like I had people like vouching for me within the organizations trying to get me in to job positions. And I found that the nonprofit sort of sphere was very heavily influenced by, it didn't feel like a very fair process of who was being chosen to get those positions. There was a lot of favoritism that I saw, which at some point I thought was like just me that was experiencing this. And it was like people didn't want me for some reason. They didn't feel like I was qualified. And I went through a lot of like imposter syndrome throughout that time. And then I realized talking to other people that it was something that a lot of people have experienced. And then the longer I stayed in Spain, the more I realized that getting a job in Spain is actually something that's like really hard in general, which I'm glad I didn't know that before I decided to stay. But the unemployment rates for like people our age are like through the roof because a lot of people don't actually even start their like career until they're like maybe 30. Like people go and they keep getting all of these different degrees to find a way that they can get their foot in the door for some sort of job. And then they're terrified to leave that job because they don't want to like lose it and then not have the security of like, I have no idea how long it's going to take to find another job. So it's really competitive because so many people have so many different degrees. So I was very frustrated by that. And I started teaching at a local language academy because it was basically the only job I could get. But at that point, I was very much against like being an English teacher because I didn't define myself as like a teacher. That's not who I thought I was. And actually through the process, I found that I was able to help people with a lot of things that didn't necessarily have to do with like, you know, the grammar and writing and correcting things, prepping for exams. Apart from all of that, people came to me with a lot of questions that had to do with pronunciation, with fluency, with confidence, with public speaking, of all different ages. And I found that I was really interested in it. And the owner of the academy allowed me to have the freedom to play with that and try and figure out myself ways I could help them just because it felt fun for me. And then that turned into me launching my own business to do something like that because I figured there were so many ways that I wanted to help people. And if people wouldn't hire me to allow me to help other people that were moving to another country, wanted to get a job in another language, you know, immigrating, refugees, if someone wouldn't let me do it, I was going to make it happen for myself. And I was able to help a lot of people on my own by launching my own business. So the actual struggles of not being able to find a job in the area I wanted to is the only reason why I think I had the courage to start a business in another country, which was really intimidating to think about for me, because I never pictured myself as a business owner. And then all of the blocks sort of like lined up for this like beautiful path, and I just followed it.
Okay, and then so tell me a little bit more about your business. So like I mean, because I love your mindset of I'm gonna make it happen for myself, because I feel like a lot of times I don't know, I feel like sometimes it can be easy to get discouraged. But like when you started that, like how long ago was that? And like how did that kind of come into existence?
It was about 3 years ago now is when I started. Yeah, because I finished my year at the English Academy during COVID. And then, in 2020. And then after that, I was like, well, I have no choice. Like, I don't have a job. Like, everything was pretty much like paralyzed, like economy wise in Spain. And I was like, I already knew I wanted to do this thing and I wanted to make it happen for myself. So like, now's the time. I basically don't have a plan B, which had its cons, but it also had its pros in the sense that I just had a fire under my ass to make it happen, because I was like, if I don't, I have no, I have no way to just like make life work. And I was really passionate about it. That's the thing. Like, if I wasn't so passionate about that, it wouldn't have been something I was able to pull off. But because I believed in it so much and I was so excited to figure out how to make it work and find the way that I could get the knowledge to be qualified in the things that I was really obsessed with, that no one seemed to be like talking about in traditional language learning environments. It just made it feel a lot easier and really exciting.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's really, I feel like that's like the one motivation that like will get anybody to kind of, to get up and do something. It's like, well, like, especially when it comes to visas, it's like, if I got to do something or else like I'm going to get kicked out,
Yeah.
Especially, you got to be here to do, like, if you're not here to do what your visa says you're here to do, it's like, well, yeah. So, I mean, anyway, so with your fiance, did you meet him here, like, or like, did you meet them here for you in Spain?
Yeah, he was actually in the same master's program as I was in. So, and he ended up being in it by the there's a phrase that I can't think of. It's coming to me in Spanish, a phrase that we always say for like how he got into the program, but it was like by pure luck, because he decided sort of last minute that like this was the thing and he wanted to be in this program, and he started it like very last minute, the process. He actually missed the first week, so I didn't even see him there that first week. And then the second week there was like this new face there, and I was like, oh, who's this guy that just like slipped in last minute into the last spot in the program? And just like from there, I think it was just like fate. We were basically inseparable, like from the time we met each other. And then after the master's program ended, he asked me to stay, and so I did.
Okay. Well, that's cute. I feel like, it's like you never really know who you're gonna meet, like anywhere in life. So, but overall, I think that's a really good note to end on. But I thank you so much, Kayla, for your time. And just before we go, I would like for you to tell us, like, where can we find you?
Yeah, so I'm most active on Instagram. Just my handle is my name, at Kayla Belush. Also on LinkedIn, you can find me, same name. And that's where I talk a lot about different things regarding accent, fluency, public speaking, communication in general, on a more holistic sort of sphere. A lot of things that you would never hear people talk about in traditional language learning environments or schools, academies, that sort of thing. So I love to talk about communication in a different way.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much. And I will see you in the next episode.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jazz.
No problem.